can see how much rain we had last night. Just see the overspill of everything that's run down the hill, and it takes a fair amount of water to do that. So we'll take a look in the plot and see what signs there are of a good soaking in there too. I thought I'd approach the plot from a different gate today, just to show you a different way in. So here's the path. I tend to mow this path just to keep it under control, and down to my plot. And everything's looking really lush from the rain over the last couple of days. Now the other night when I was doing the chickens, I noticed that one of these courgettes had killed over. You can probably see which one, this fella here. And actually this is had it. You can see where the courgette stem has been eaten away by the slugs and resulted in it keeling over. And the others seem to be okay, and it's no great loss to lose one, but I'm probably now going to replace that with one of the smaller squash, and that'll make use of the space. And whilst this looks reasonably healthy at the moment, I'm pretty sure it's not going to come to anything. Okay, so the telltale sign of how wet it's been, I think, will be the wheelbarrow, which I left turned up. And yep, there we go. That's a couple of days rain, and the wheelbarrow is nearly half full. So everything's had a seriously good soaking, and that leaves me to get on with other jobs and not worry about watering. Well, I'll get fluff out in a moment. Looks like we've got an egg in the corner as well. Thought I'd quickly show you the garlic that I pulled out the other day. So it's drying nicely, yellowing on the leaves, and there's some pretty good garlic in there. So the other thing I noticed this morning is we've had a bit of a second flush of these fungi. Or is it that they're just going over now? I think they probably are going over, and the ones that I had in this path, yeah, they're also going over. Very unusual, but very attractive. A nice addition to the plot. Voluntary fungi. I really don't think they're edible, and I've not been able to identify them, but I haven't worked too hard at that, so maybe I'll continue to do so. There's been some serious warmth with this wet weather, which has made it very humid indeed. And I can see from out here that the polytunnel is seriously steamed up. Oh, I might have to remove him in a bit. So we'll just take a look in there and see what it's like. I would imagine that the temperature has risen fairly dramatically. In we go. So we're at 25 degrees and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Yesterday it hit a high of 43. So yeah, it's certainly very warm. And as you can see, this is absolutely covered in condensation. We seem to have had a faller here, but it's in good order, so we'll eat that one. And you can see that there's quite a lot of lettuce that are bolting now, and I'll pull one out today because Mrs. K is giving me a shopping list. So I'll be showing you what we harvest for the table today, and we try and take only what we're going to eat, and that's going to be a selection of things. but I will be taking out a couple of these, I think, giving them to the chickens and planting some of my spares. On the cucumber front, we seem to have a flower under there and a forming cucumber, so I'm also going to clear some space around that cucumber and start to decide how it's going to travel up the cane or steel post, or whether in fact I string it. And in the corner there, while I'm there, I'll be moving some of that bindweed that seems to be wanting to grow. A lot of these strawberries now are throwing runners, and this is a bit like a jungle over here. And I notice a few green fly starting to form on the tips of these new runners, so I might have to deal with those manually by just removing them physically. And the carrots are just really coming together well now. And I notice I've got a bit of a formation of a carrot down there, which is nice to see. So I think the next job on the list is the shopping list. Okay, well I think I'll get Puff out. She doesn't go out on her own, so I need to carry her out. And Sugar, who you saw came and went then, has been broody for about the last 2 to 3 weeks, and that's the first time I've seen her going out of the nest box. And in the meantime, Pepper has become broody, and there she is, and she'll sit there now probably for the same amount of time as Sugar did, which will be about 2 to 3 weeks, and not move unless we move her. So unfortunately it means we're going to feed and water her, otherwise she will just ignore food and water. I'm sure she'll do her own thing in reality, but we do like just to make sure that she's catered for. So let's do some moving out of Fluff. This morning I was watching William Coleman's garden and allotment, and his channel is absolutely fantastic, but most importantly he has an immense amount of knowledge. And I recently did a video on garlic and my garlic and what was happening, and I watched his video this morning, and wow, did I learn a lot. So what I learned was that rust, not a big problem really, and to hang in there and not to harvest at the cost of the size of the bulb. Now I harvested a small amount of mine, probably nearly 50% I guess, and I've been happy with the garlic I got out of it. But based on what I learnt this morning, I'm going to hang in there with these. And I also learnt that the seed heads, which are called scapes, they only appear on the hard neck variety, and the soft neck variety doesn't get them, which sort of indicates that these are all the soft neck variety. And I do recall buying mainly soft neck garlic, and what I learnt was to just keep an eye on these bottom 3 leaves, and when the 3rd leaf starts to wane and leave this world, then that's the time to harvest. So amongst other things, I learned an awful lot this morning, and just wanted to say thank you to William. So this morning Mrs. K has given me a shopping list, and I always enjoy a shopping list, coming over the allotment and harvesting the things that we've grown. So I wrote it down because, do you know what, my memory, it's not what it used to be. So I tend to get a bit overzealous when I do this sort of thing, and I get a good ticking off because I've harvested more than we need, so I need to be restrained. So this morning we want strawberries, but only 6, some spring onions, but only 4, some beetroots to roast, but only 4, potatoes. Now that's going to be exciting. My potatoes, they're probably not quite ready yet, but the early ones that I put into the buckets, I'm happy to take one of those out, and it's going to be exciting to see just how many new potatoes we got in there. Lettuce, a small amount, and just to make up that salad from the picking pots that I made, a bit of coriander, a bit of basil, a little bit of parsley, and a little bit of rocket. And I get all that together and pop it over the house so Mrs. K can get underway with whatever she wants. So, got my list. Follow me. So, a little bit of parsley out of my picking pot. And I noticed when I was looking at this the other day, I seem to have either a pumpkin or a courgette growing in here. I'm just going to let it do its thing. And if it wants to spill over and grow and give us some extra food, then good times. So, just a couple of pinches of parsley to add some flavour. There we are, 4, very restrained. Okay, coriander. Now I love coriander. This is Calypso, which is the variety that's supposed to be resistant to bolting. And I'm just going to pick some tips, and it's a good idea to keep coriander picked like this, because once it sort of gets too bushy it starts to go to flower and bolt. And this rocket is started to do just that. I've started to see some flowers, and I'm going to pinch those out and just take the leaves off, and that will just prolong it a little bit further. And this has got a lovely flavour to it and adds a real different dimension to a salad. One more for luck. Now here's one of those lettuce that is bolting, and I'm going to take the whole thing out, shake the roots off, and you can see that it's getting really tall now. So for our needs, I'm going to pinch the top out, and the chickens are going to have a feast from this. So that's good. And spring onion wise, I did these in clusters, so I can afford just to twist out the odd 1 or 2 that we want to eat. And if I just pick the biggest ones, then they're ripe and ready, and the smaller ones will grow on and feed us like this in the not too distant future. Let's see if we've got some over here. Now they're not quite so big. And we'll have one of these. I quite like the thin ones, they're a little bit more mild, and once they're chopped up they're just delicious. So a few spring onions, and next on the list is the beetroot. So the idea here is that I grew them in clusters, at least 2s and 3s, and if I take one of those now, the other one will just grow on. So here's a really good example. I'm going to take this fella out, just twist him. Which leaves the other beetroot and gives me a fine beetroot to roast and eat. And I think at that size we probably only need another one. Now while I'm down here amongst the salad crops, I'm gonna just plant a couple more of the lettuce that will see us through the next phase, because these will bolt more and more now as the warm weather comes in, and I just want to make sure that we've got some succession of new salad crops. So I'm gonna just take these spares that I've had for some time and get them dug in. No trowel with me. I've got one. Oh yes, there we go. So let's get this one in here. Just push the plug in and good to go. And we're going to have another one just next to it where we've got this nice gap. And I'm getting to the point where most of the plugs that I've got left are red lettuce, but that's fine. So he's in, and I've got another space down here where I think I had one out earlier on in the week, and I'll get one into there. And that's how we'll carry on the season as we go. Oh, missed one. Let's just fill one in here as well. And keeping them in the cells like this just seems to keep them small, and as long as you keep them watered, they'll last months, and they work great then to plug these gaps. So if you've got spare lettuce when you plant up, don't hesitate to try and keep them and feed you a little bit longer. So down in here with the cucumbers, I'm just going to clear away a few leaves, make sure that it's exposed to the light, and I'll give those to the chickens. And I've got a good few cucumbers forming on that one that my neighbour gave me, and I've also got a flower on the one that I planted. It's still very small indeed, but I'm going to spend a few minutes now just weeding out here, because there's not much weed, but it pays to clear it and get these bindweeds out as well. Okay, 6 strawberries. I've got one faller, which was good, and that one's a bit over actually, so that's heading for the chickens. And I want to pick the best ones we've got. Ah, some lovely ones here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But 2 of those were only small ones. So I'm going to have 2 more. And these are going in a smoothie. So this is the moment of truth. Now us gardeners, we get really excited by moments like this, which is understandable, I guess. So you can see I've got 4 pots of these, one down there, and they started to yellow and develop these black spots. So it's really not far off harvesting time. They've flowered and finished flowering, and I've been watching this one and seeing some potatoes on the surface. So this is the moment. I'm going to cut off the foliage, empty into the bucket, and see what we've got. Okay, moment of truth time. Now this is either going to be a disaster, disappointing, or it's going to be delighting. And this is an exciting moment, and we'll open up this earth mound and see what we've got in it. We're not expecting anything particularly large. If we do, that'll be a bonus. But this is about getting some early, fresh, homegrown salad potatoes. So let's go. Wow, they certainly do look fabulous. That's the seed potato, that much browner. And there's some really nice potatoes in here. It's surprising how many you can get early on in the season using this method. And this isn't the spent compost that I've been using. The early varieties, or the early session of growing that I did, I used shop bought compost, which was available at the time. There's another one of the seed potatoes, and plenty of small ones, but there's plenty of medium ones in here as well. And I'm already thinking that this pile of potatoes is a great success. It'll be great to see the final quantity when we get them all out. And they just keep coming. There's some proper old big shoots. I'm going to disregard the really tiny ones because they're really not worth eating. They're so small. But everything else is in the mix. And I put them straight into this sieve so that I can dunk them in the water butt and give them a good wash. And when I've done that, I'll be able to show you the final product. So for now, I'll just carry on digging. So that's a bucket full, and that feels well worth the effort. And given that that's the first pot that I've opened and it's still early, it means if I leave the others just a bit longer, then they'll just increase in size, and those smaller potatoes, they would probably catch up on most of them. So I've taken out most of the root and any of the old seed potatoes, any small potatoes that I found in the compost, and then that compost is going to continue to be used with my regeneration of compost processes that I've started to trial. And hopefully by feeding them, or feeding the soil and keeping it through the winter, it'll be ready to go again next year. So there we are, this morning's harvest for eating. And as far as potatoes go, there's some great potato growers out there. But for me, that's about as good as it gets. Not a single blemish on these, good size. And that's what we do this for. Allotments for fun and food. So it's time to get this cabbage out and get the kale in. And the chickens are going to have a hell of a feast. We had some of this cabbage in the last week or so, and to be honest, it's getting a bit tough now. So there really is no point in eating food that you don't want to. And we make good use of this, of course, with the chickens. So I'm going to unnet this, clean it up, and I'll take out the cabbage that take up the bulk of the space, and perhaps just leave one for feeding the chickens on another day. It's going to be one hell of a feast. So that's cleared the bed out, nicely, and there was very little weed in there. And when you consider I haven't weeded that for months and months, it just shows how the no dig process doesn't really give weeds the opportunity, apart from the really tenacious ones. So we've got all the cabbage out, apart from the one plant which we'll leave for the chickens later on, and I'll start to get this kale in. Now, the kale I sowed a lot later than most other things, and that's fine because we use the kale mainly in the winter, and I'm going to just get probably 3 plants deep and 4 rows maybe. So we've got 2 varieties in here. We've got the Russian kale, which is a bit more frilly and goes a little pink colour on the edge of the leaves, and we've got the Caballero Nero style kale. This variety is called Toscana, and there's some good strong plants in here of that too. So we'll get that spread through the bed and then put the net back, and we'll be ready to grow the kale on. So vegetable bed maintenance at this time of year for me is pretty standard throughout the plot, and it'll take a couple of hours to do what's required here. If I didn't use a no dig method, that would be an awful lot longer. So this is a typical bed. Now I'll get the nets off, which is a bit of a pain, but saves the crop from being devastated by the cats. So there we are, we can lift that off now, just throw it back. And even though I weeded this bed probably 3 weeks ago now, we've got quite a bit going on. We've got the mare's tail, classic, and I keep 2 pots for this process. One for weed that I don't really want going in the compost bin, and I know that people do have great success putting these sort of weeds in the compost bin, but from a preference point of view, I only tend to put things in there that are not quite as tenacious as bindweed and mare's tail. So bits of mare's tail to come out, little tufts of grass, which is a product of the manure, and then I tend to take away these leaves that have been well munched by our friends the slugs, because if they can't get to decaying matter, it does deter them slightly. I'm not saying that it is the total answer, but it does help if you remove it. Otherwise, in this bed, I can't see a great deal that's different from that, but I do need to remove the mare's tail and those holy leaves. So I'll get on and do that, and this bed should be back up to scratch. So there we are, that probably took me about 5 minutes in reality, and that's the bed done. It really is no effort at all, and 5 minutes added up per bed, yeah, it does amount to quite a bit, but it's not a difficult task, and to be honest, it's not one that I don't enjoy. When you can look at your crops and get the weeds out that you know are going to get in their way, it all feels productive, and that's part of the fun. This run of bean bed has been really quite weed free for quite a period of time, really, since I put them in, and I did the weeding when I did that. But now I can start to see bits of rose bay willow herb. The mare's tail, which is in the path, is really becoming quite prevalent, and I'm going to have to think about what I do. But for now, I'm just taking it out as I go. And within these beds, there's a little bit of clover, a little bit of grass, and a good old mare's tail. And I'll just work through that. Again, it'll probably take me 5 or 10 minutes, and it's a job well done then. And these beans will be all that much better for not having to compete with any of those weeds. I started thinking this week that maybe I'll plant something in the middle of these while I can still get to it. Maybe leeks, we'll see how we go. But it seems reasonable that when the beans are finished and I take them down, if I had a row of leeks in the middle, then I could use those quite quickly, and then when they're used, cover the bed in the mulch for the autumn. So just thinking ahead and working out how I would get maximum use out of the land that I'm using is part of the process and is also enjoyable. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.